In the darkest hours of the night, when even the moon seemed reluctant to cast its light, Clara wandered the decrepit streets of a forgotten town. She had once been full of dreams, but life had chewed her up and spat her out into this desolation. Now, she sold her body to make ends meet, surviving day by day, her spirit eroding with every transaction. That night began like any other. The air was thick with dampness, carrying the faint stench of rot. Clara leaned against a crumbling brick wall, her leather jacket barely shielding her from the cold. Her eyes scanned the street for potential clients. The usual faces passed by. Some averted their gaze, others offered leering smiles. She had learned to read people quickly. It was a survival skill. But then he appeared. A man emerged from the fog, his figure unusually tall and lean. His face was hidden beneath the brim of a wide black hat, and his hands were gloved. Clara felt an involuntary shiver, not from the cold, but from something deeper, a primal instinct warning her. But she ignored it. Business was business. He stopped a few feet from her and tilted his head slightly. His voice, when he spoke, was low and smooth, like the hum of a distant storm. "Are you available for the night?" Clara nodded, her practiced smile slipping into place. "Depends on what you're looking for." The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash, far more than anyone had ever offered her. The sight of the money made her hesitation evaporate. Desperation was a powerful motivator. "Follow me," he said, turning toward an old car parked across the street. Clara hesitated for a moment, but eventually followed, the allure of the money overpowering her unease. The drive was silent. The man didn't make small talk, and Clara didn't dare to ask questions. They drove out of the town and into the countryside, where the road grew narrower and the trees denser. Finally, they arrived at a mansion, a towering structure that looked like it had been plucked from a Gothic novel. Its windows were dark, and the ivy that crawled up its walls seemed alive, writhing in the pale moonlight. "Come inside," the man said, stepping out of the car. Clara hesitated again, but reminded herself of the cash in her pocket. She followed him up the creaking steps and through the heavy oak doors that groaned as they opened. The interior was no less unsettling. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the only light came from flickering candelabras that lined the walls. The place smelled of damp wood and something metallic, like rust, but sharper. "Wait here," the man said, gesturing to a grand sitting room with antique furniture that seemed untouched by time. He disappeared down a long hallway, his footsteps echoing ominously. Clara sat on the edge of a velvet armchair, her nerves on edge. The silence of the house was oppressive, broken only by the faint creak of wood settling. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and just as she considered leaving, the man returned. This time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood 3 other figures, all dressed in black, their faces obscured by shadowy hoods. Clara's unease turned to outright fear, but before she could react, the man spoke again. "You should have left when you had the chance." The hooded figures moved quickly, surrounding her before she could stand. One of them grabbed her arms, their grip unnaturally strong. She struggled, but it was futile. They dragged her down a dark corridor, deeper into the mansion, where the air grew colder with every step. They entered a cavernous room illuminated by the eerie glow of countless candles. In the center was a stone altar, its surface stained with dark, dried patches that Clara instinctively knew were blood. She was forced onto the altar, her wrists and ankles bound with rough ropes that cut into her skin. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling. "I'll do whatever you want. Just let me go." The man removed his hat, revealing a face that was both impossibly handsome and utterly inhuman. His eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and his smile revealed teeth that were too sharp, too predatory. "Oh, you've already done enough," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "You see, Clara, we don't want your body. We want your soul." The hooded figures began to chant in a language Clara couldn't understand. The sound was guttural and grating, like nails on a chalkboard, and it made her ears ache. The man raised his hands, and the shadows in the room seemed to come alive, swirling around him like a dark tornado. Clara screamed, but no sound escaped her lips. The air grew thick, pressing down on her chest, and she felt an unbearable heat building inside her. Her vision blurred, and she thought she saw faces in the shadows. Twisted, tormented faces that seemed to be reaching out to her. "You are the perfect vessel," the man said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "Your despair, your pain, your desperation. They've primed you for this moment." The shadows converged on Clara, enveloping her completely. She felt them seeping into her skin, crawling into her veins, invading every part of her being. Pain unlike anything she had ever experienced ripped through her, and she blacked out. When she awoke, she was back on the street corner, leaning against the same crumbling wall. The fog was thick, and the street was eerily silent. For a moment, she thought it had all been a nightmare, until she noticed the man standing across the street, watching her with those glowing eyes. She tried to move, to run, but her body wouldn't obey. She realized with growing horror that she was no longer in control. Her lips curved into a smile that wasn't hers as her body stepped forward, beckoning to the next passerby. Now, Clara is trapped, her soul imprisoned within her own body, forced to lure others into the same fate. The man and his hooded followers watch from the shadows, their hunger never sated, as the cycle repeats. Night after night, victim after victim.